He's going to share with us a little of his research, okay, and talk to you about maybe some possible career choices. If you like bio, if this might sound like something for you, take the opportunity that's presented. If you have any questions, of course, Drew is good to answer those too. All right, so I'll turn it over.
Try to do a little better.
Well, you had a dry one.
Yeah. All right. So hello. Thanks for listening to me. So I study monkeys on this little island in West Africa. Sort of walk you through that. I sort of have this joke of, I spent half my life living in a tent. So if you're interested in that, do exactly what I did. Yeah. But if not, then this is probably not for you. And so I'll just start off with this. I'm from Jersey. I'm from the eastern part of Point Pleasant Beach, and I always have to defend Jersey, basically. When people say, "Oh my God, you're from Jersey," I'm like, "Well, I'm not from that Jersey, right? That's really not at all what this place is like, right?" And to me, Jersey is this, right? I mean, I grew up, half a mile, a couple blocks from the beach. I, grew up fishing, swimming, running, mountain biking in a lair, and so I always sort of loved the outdoors and being outdoors and doing stuff like that. But I didn't really see it as something that I would pursue as a career or anything like that. And then so when I came to high school, I got involved. I took this British bio course, and we did our leaf identification, collection identification, and that was my first real sort of foray into scientific inquiry, and that was a good time. Very difficult at the time, but looking back, I actually still have this the folder I put together. So it was a good time. And then when I went to college, I like Ms. Bridge said, I was pre-med, but I still kept sort of the environmental side happy by running our greenhouse and working with a professor who studied these flowers here, dahlias, and their distribution across Mexico. And then a little bit later in college, I decided that I wanted to study abroad. I wanted to go to New Zealand because it's an awesome place just to have some fun. And then while I was there, I got really on board with what their Department of Conservation does. So they run backcountry huts, and they really manage their resources and tourism in those protected areas really well, because they see conservation as an investment in the health and well-being of their people and their country. And I really I really liked that sort of ethos behind it. And so I came back and I was like, well, pre-med is not for me. I can't do it. So I took an animal behavior class, and I started studying these guys. These are black and white rough lemurs. They're from Madagascar. I studied them in the Philadelphia Zoo, and I really liked it. So I decided to turn what was just a semester project into a senior thesis, my capstone project in college. And so I studied them at the zoo, and then I also studied them at Duke University. They have a big primate center down there, so I went down there. I studied them there and compared the two captive environments, so it was a lot of fun. That's actually a little baby one that got born while I was doing my research, so he's pretty adorable. And then after doing that, I was like, well, I might as well just go gung-ho into this conservation thing and try to get as much out of college as I can. So I took an opportunity to go back abroad, study abroad, on this little island, West Africa, called Bioko Island. It's just off the coast of Cameroon, if you guys are familiar with Africa. So there's Cameroon, it's right in here. It is a volcanic island, so there's three big peaks on the island: Pico Basle in the north, and then Pico Biao, and then the Grand Caldera in the southwest. So it's really steep. It goes from sea level to over 10,000 feet in under 20 kilometers, so that's pretty cool. It's just north of the equator, and this southern part is actually considered one of the rainiest places in the world. It gets over 35 feet of rain per year. The capital in the north is Malabo. It's got about 100,000 people, and then there's these light green areas, which are protected areas, but nobody guards it. It's just sort of on paper, so just sort of remember that. So this is what it looks like. These are some nice photos. It's just like New Zealand. Big mountains, lots of green forest, all this awesome stuff. Unlike New Zealand, there's all these great monkeys, which are pretty cool. This one's the biggest on the island, biggest animal on the island other than humans. These two guys on the top right, they're both colobus monkeys, so they're leaf-eating monkeys. Their stomachs are similar to deer stomachs, ruminant stomachs. And then these guys are all fruit-eating monkeys. So it's really awesome, they've got all this great stuff in the forest. And then they also have this, right, this conflict between resources. This is that big monkey shot and being sold for consumption in the market in the capital. What this is it's called bushmeat. It's basically any wild animal that's hunted for consumption. It's a really highly valued product. It's just an animal, but it's a highly valued thing that people extract from the forests across the tropical belt around the world. It's a highly commercial market, so it's not just people hunting to survive. It's people that hunt and then sell that as a career, as a job. In most places in the world, it's now considered a higher threat than forest deforestation because people are just wiping things out. The forest can still be intact, and there'll be no primates or any vertebrates in it. In the place that I work, the estimate is over 60% of the taxa that live there are harvested unsustainably, so they're being hunted to extinction. And what drives this is the high value relative to the production cost. So all you need to do is have a gun and a shotgun shell, which is relatively easy to acquire. And then, so if you spend $2 on a shell and then you shoot a monkey and sell it for $15, it's a pretty good profit margin. Right? And then urban populations and increased incomes. Now that there's a lot of economic development in Africa, people have money to spend on things that they deem as a luxury, and so they're eating more of these monkeys. And this is what the market looks like. Like I said, commercial hunting is a primary threat to the stuff on my island because it's so steep that you can't really log any of the forests, so they never really did. It's a luxury item, and supermarkets sell domestic meat at lower prices. So you can go to the market and buy a chicken for about $5, $6, a whole chicken. You can go to the bushmeat market and you can buy a rat, which will maybe feed 2 people, not as much as a chicken would, for double that price. So I call it a case study because there's a lot of things about this island that make it really unique. It's small, so if you guys are familiar with Pinelands, really awesome part of Jersey, the island is under half the size of the Pinelands in South Jersey. The consumption of this stuff is restricted only to this, or predominantly to this capital area of Malabo. So if we're counting stuff in Malabo, we really get a sense of what's going on the island. There's only 2 major routes to the market, so those red lines there. There's a big mountain in the middle, right? So if we want to control or if we want to count stuff that's coming to the market, you only have to know, is it coming from the west road or the east road? The market's pretty much entirely for profit. It's not a subsistence thing. People aren't going to the market to get their food for the day just because they need to. They're going because they want to go buy that. And it's supported by non-native commercial hunters. So the indigenous tribe on the island doesn't have a history of hunting things like primates. They're more sort of agriculturalist. The people that hunt are from the mainland that are coming over to the island and hunting out their forests. Like I said, deforestation, agriculture are not likely to have an impact. The green area is developed, but like the dark green, but then pretty much everything else is left alone because the topography is too difficult to actually do anything on it. And the market doesn't fulfill the economic needs of people. The money that's estimated to come from the bushmeat market makes up a fraction of 1% of the gross domestic product of the country. So it's not like this big booming market that's giving a lot of people jobs. And then on top of that, if you look at the yellow circle, that's what the estimate of a protein requirement would be for 100,000 people. And the green is all of the protein. So everything sold in the bushmeat market makes up that green circle. And everything sold in the blue, right? The blue circle is just monkeys. So it's not like people need this to survive. It barely makes up a fraction of the protein requirement for 100,000 people. and take into mind as well, this is the estimate of the protein, like based on numbers that we have. This is an estimate of 100,000 people. There's actually like probably almost 1 million people in the country. So this yellow circle could be much, much bigger, but that blue circle is not going to change, right? It's not feeding the population. And so my research was trying to get to the bottom of how do you quantify hunting. So how do you go, what's going on in the forest? How does that translate like overall to the conservation status of these monkeys? And then what's going on in the markets as well? And so I go about this in 2 different ways. So what are the people eating, right? And that's basically counting things in the market, and then what's going on in the forest, right? So this is what the what are the people eating looks like. I have a guy that goes to the market and he counts monkeys for me, and all the other things that are sold in the market as well. All right, so we have over 197,000 dead things counted over 3,700 days. This started well before I was involved. I'm not that old. And we counted 45 species, 45 different species that were sold in the market. Of that, rodents, so like this rat and porcupine, they make up about 41%. Ungulates, which are hoofed animals, little forest antelopes, they make up about 30%. Primates make up about 18 to 20. Reptiles like snakes and turtles and stuff like that is 4%, and birds is 2%. And then in terms of individual species, the blue duiker, which is a forest antelope, that's the most, the highest number sold. Makes up about a quarter of the market. The pouched rat, which is that guy, makes up about 22%. Porcupine, and then the red-eared monkey, which I'll show you later on, makes up almost 10%. And so what that looks like, you throw up all the data, right? This black line. This is an estimate of carcasses per day over the entire data set. Okay, so there's a whole lot of stuff going on there, right? And the take-home message here is kind of went nothing happening for a while and then went way up, right? And you can see here there's the red line is trapped animals. So there's 2 ways to catch these things in the forest. They either set a trap like a wire snare that something, you know, it puts its foot in and then it goes up, or to shoot with a gun. And it's really simple to tell them apart because, you know, if you have like a 10-pound monkey that's been blasted with a shotgun, you can tell that, as opposed to something that hasn't been shot with a gun. You know, it's pretty straightforward. So anyway, so we count this stuff. We've got all the carcasses. We've got shotgun. And we've got trap. And then that's a look at the primates here, down at the bottom. So just 2 things to take away from this. The market is growing a lot. And then there's these 3 periods in the market as well, right? So the first period, I call them epics, but epic 1, where the market is, you know, sort of stable. Epic 2, where the market is really growing, and then shotgun and trap switch. So trapping goes down, shotgun goes up. And then epic 3, where you've got a lot of growth. And then that epic 3 is really marked by this drop here in the primates. If you see it went way down, they passed a primate hunting law. And so this country is led by a dictator, the longest standing dictator in Africa now. And one of the benefits of a dictatorship is people are desperately afraid of you. So they passed a law, and rather than getting shot or beaten up or put in jail, they didn't break the law, right? They stopped hunting primates. But then immediately after, when they saw that no one was going to do anything, right? They decided, well, I've got to get as much of that as I possibly can, right? If your mom says don't eat any cookies, but then she puts a tray of cookies in front of you and doesn't do anything about it, you're going to eat the cookies, right? I mean, so yeah, so the primate hunting went crazy. And so I wanted to look at, you know, there's a lot of noise in those things, a lot of stuff going on. So I wanted to look at like what's the actual trend that's happening. So how can I simplify this, right? And without going too in depth here, what I did was I developed this statistics model that broke that long noisy line down into 3 parts. Okay. So the first part is the long-term trend, right? So what's happening sort of over time? That's what I wanted to get at. And then the next part is a seasonal variation, so that's going to be changing with the rainy season, the dry season is going to be going up and down. and then there's an error, right? So any sort of statistical model has an error, right? So what I did was I took out the seasonal and the error, right? And that just gives me one line for each species, any sort of count, like monkeys, rats, total carcasses, I have one line, right? It makes it a lot simpler, right? There's no up and down and everything, it's just a line. All right, and then what I did was I calculated the average slope, so that's the change in the number of carcasses per month, for each taxon, so for each species, for each aggregation, and for each time period, right? So this slope is pretty simple, just rise over run for each different thing. And then what I did was I normalized the slopes for a comparison, right? And all that says is if there's 50 rats sold per day and there's 10 monkeys sold per day, you can't compare those two directly because the magnitude, the number of rats is so much higher than the number of monkeys. So if you normalize it, right, and I won't go into how we did that, you can put them all on the same scale. So you're comparing all the things against each other. So you can say, well, relative to monkeys, rats did X, right? So that's what we're getting at. And this is what it looks like, right? This is that graph that you guys had seen before, right? And then this is the product of the analysis. So you can see in blue, the first period, which is this whole area, it's slightly below 0, right? So that means if I drive one line through this whole thing, the slope is slightly negative. It's going down towards the end of the period. In epoch 2, it's going slightly up, right? The slope is like 0.25. It's going slightly up, right? Epoch 3 goes up over 3, right? It's going straight up, right? And that's what we're getting at. So the steeper the slope, the more drastic the rate of change is. Right? And so if you look at it, these are some of the aggregations. So the island, right? You saw the island was slightly negative in that stable first period, and then went way up in the second and third period, and staying up here, right? So the island is increasing and growing at a steady rate. The trap and the shotgun rates, right? So if you remember, trap went down in the second period, and the shotgun went up, right? So the relationship, they switched the inverse, and now shotgunning is increasing at a steady rate. Primates, I showed you the primates. It was 0, slightly above. Oh my goodness, it's clicking too far. Anyway, I skipped over it. Oh, geez, sorry, took me off. Caught me off guard. So the primates, talked about that. This is the porcupine, and this is the rat that we talked about, right? These animals are predominantly taken by traps. So most of the time they're not shot. They're pretty small. So it's going to be hard to shoot them with a shotgun. Plus a rat, if you shoot with a shotgun, it's like obliterated. So you don't want to do that. Anyway, so they're decreasing, right? So animals that are taken by trap are decreasing. The rate that they appear in the market is going down. Whereas this is a good example, right? So this guy, the blue diker, all right, that's the number one thing sold in the market. That's staying about the same, right? It's increasing as the market grows. The numbers of it are, it's going up in the market, but it's not increasing at any particularly drastic rate. Whereas this guy, the red diker down here, is a big animal. It's taken by shotgun, right? It's not typically trapped. That's going to go up, right? So this is sort of the indicative of that change. Things that are taken by trap are either stable or decreasing, and things that are taken by shotgun are going up at a high rate. And what's bad about that, and especially with the primates, is the bigger animals, right, take a long time to reproduce. So if you shoot them, they can't reproduce and replace those individuals that have been taken out of the population. So they're more apt to go extinct more quickly than smaller animals. Whereas these guys can reproduce pretty well. Rats reproduce like wildfire, so it doesn't really matter how many you take out. And then if you look at the primates, the general trend here with the primates, right, in that third period after they passed the hunting law, they all go way up because hunting is going crazy, right? But the sort of positive note here is these two species, this red colobus and the putty-nosed guenon, right? That's this guy and this guy. They don't go up with the same rate that these all do. They don't have this real significant increase in the third period. And the positive note is that their populations are centered down here in the southern part of the island, where it's really hard to get to, it's really difficult. And so just by sheer fact that their populations are far away from the market, they've gotten some sort of passive protection. So they're being protected because they're far away. And so, sort of conclusions for this, the overall carcasses, like the market has grown since we started the project in 1997. There's a lot of carcasses coming out of the market from the island. There's a lot more hunters. There's more access to the forest as development has gone up. And then I haven't shown it here, but now the island, the profits on the market are so high that people are bringing bushmeat from the mainland and bringing it to the island. They're shooting stuff in the forest, putting it on a boat, bringing it to the market, and they're still making a profit. So it's a lot of money coming into this market. The capture method, we've hit that, has gone from trap to shotgun, because when you shotgun hunt, you can shoot only things you want to shoot, so you selectively hunt. You can time when you shoot things, so you can organize getting that meat to the market, and then it's more efficient. So if you want to catch a lot of things with trap, you have to set a lot of traps, you have to cut wood, you have to have rope, you have to set these traps are kind of difficult to set, you have to go out and check them all the time, and then, like I said, it's one of the rainiest places in the world, so if you trap something, depending on the trap, a lot of times it dies, but sometimes it doesn't. And so you've got an animal that may be dead, maybe not dead, probably has some sort of broken bone hanging on a string in a wet, humid environment. It's not good, right? So things are going to spoil really quickly. So shotgun hunting is more efficient. And then increases in primate carcass rates across the board, but these two guys, the colobus and the putty nose, they don't follow the trend. So it's a good, one good thing amidst all this other bad things. And what's driving this is the demand and commercialization of the market, so there's a lot of money coming through, increased development, and then an immigration of Fang, so that's a mainland tribe, and then other non-natives. So they found the country is basically driven by oil, and a lot of people are coming to the island to work in the oil industry, and those people have a cultural tradition of eating bushmeat, so they come and they eat the bushmeat. And then there's this other thing called the Mardi Gras, that I call the Mardi Gras mentality, and that essentially is people are afraid of losing access to a resource, so they seek to exploit the resource before the effects of legislation take hold, right? So they passed the primate hunting ban, and once they saw that no one was enforcing it, they said, well, I should probably get at it before someone actually does do something about this, right? And we got two distinct examples of this. In 2002, big multinational conservation organization came in and said, hunting primates is bad, we can't do that anymore. And immediately following that, hunting of primates went up and continued increasing until the passing of the hunting ban. So the hunting ban, it went immediately down, and then as soon as they saw that no one was going to enforce the law, it went way up. And then the second part, what's going on in the forest, right? Sort of concurrent to that. This is the part I was talking about earlier where I spend my life in the tent. Excuse me, I more or less walk through the forest and count monkeys. And a lot of times it's like this, and that's great, and it's really awesome, and it's super easy, and I saw one monkey. But a lot of times they're also like this. They're all running away from you because they're afraid you're going to shoot them. And it's quite difficult. And you guys can make out here. So this is the same species. This is a little baby, actually, clinging to its mother as they're flying through the trees. And so what I've done, if you guys remember the island, so this green protected area is this big white blob here, right? And I've done surveys. Oops, that's fine. I've done surveys throughout the southern part of the island.
Oops.
And
I just messed you up there. There you go.
that's fine. So I've got 26 different transects. I'm going to stop moving. 26 different transects throughout the forest, and it's really great. It's the fun part of my job because I sleep in a tent, I wake up, and then I go count monkeys, and then I come back and I go back to bed in my tent, which is nice. So the technical term for all of that is I do these things called reconnaissance walks, and I collect the data with, this is really cool, it's a handheld computer with this data sequence that I put the data in, I press save, it takes a GPS point, and then all I need to do is connect that thing to my computer, and then all the data is already in a database, it has a GPS point, and I can put it on a map, and I can do all sorts of cool stuff with it because it's already on the computer. And then that saves me from, getting 15 undergrads for, 15 weeks to input all my data. And yeah, I just can't tell you enough how great that is. And so basically what I do, this reconnaissance walk idea is I go to a point in the forest, right? And I go either east or west from that point, and I follow the path of least resistance, which means if I find something like this rock, beautifully drawn rock that I can't get around, I just go around it. If I can't walk through it, I just go around it and then continue on my path. And then I calculate the abundance of primates as the number of groups that I encounter per kilometer, or I calculate hunting intensity as the number of signs of hunting, so shells and camps, shotgun shells, camps, traps, and stuff like that that I encounter per kilometer. This is just sort of a rough approximation. I'm still working on teasing out the relationship there, but generally speaking, if you see a lot of monkeys, you don't see a lot of shotgun shells, right? If you see a lot of shotgun shells, you don't see a lot of monkeys. Seems intuitive. If you hunt a lot in the forest, there's not going to be a lot of things in the forest, but the sort of intricacies of the relationship are what I'm pulling out. So some species are more resilient than other species. Some species actually tend to do quite well in hunted areas. Other species don't tolerate hunting at all. And then this sort of in-between area where there's a little bit of hunting and maybe a lower density of primates, that's the relationship that I really need to figure out. It turns out it's quite difficult to model, but I just sort of briefly will touch on this really cool thing that I did in the fall. I've now become quite an expert in counting monkeys in the forest. And so I wanted to, this red area is actually what is believed a distribution of primates. It's also a big river valley on this island. And I decided that I hadn't ever been in there, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to go into this really awesome big river valley and look for this monkey, which is believed to live in it, but has never actually, or hasn't been seen in this area of the island in like 30 years. So, and the sort of the context for this is the most endangered primate on the island, and it's the only endemic species. So this monkey, as a species, is found nowhere else in the world other than these two red areas down here. And so I was like, well, I want to go see if it's down there. So I asked for some money, and then I got money. So I got someone to pay for me to go look for it. And then what I did was I walked these black lines here. I walked those areas. Not trails. It's just sort of like walking up on the forest along. This is the actual valley itself, and then walking along the ridge over here and the ridge over here, and then going up the valley. So I walked all over these areas, and it was really awesome because this is what it looks like from above. We actually have a research station out over here. And actually, I never realized there's some cows right there, those white dots. But so this is the giant river valley here, right? And this goes all the way down out to the coast. And it's super cool. You can actually stand here, and there's a waterfall over here, and like look out over this whole valley. It's really beautiful. So that's what the forest looked like, and then these are what my camps look like. Just sort of nestled in the forest. And you find a spot. There's a stream right over here. So we basically walk all day until we found a water source, and then figure out a flat piece of ground and cut out space, and then make a camp. A lot of fun. And so what I did was, I was looking for these 7 types of primates, right? Because it's sort of like a fact-finding mission. What's going on in this area, right? And so that one I just took out on the right. That is a high-altitude primate. It's predominantly found above 1,500 meters in elevation. So all the surveys were in the lowlands, so we just sort of take that out. So we're not expecting to see that one. So we would expect to see these 6 types of monkeys, right? So these 3, the drill, the big monkey, the red-eared monkey, and the crowned monkey, are all decreasing. So someone went down there, same general area, in 2007. Not in the valley itself, but sort of around in that southeast corner. And I compared my result to them, and so all of these, the populations of these 3 monkeys have decreased significantly, right? So these monkeys are going down, and they've gone down a lot since 2007. This guy, black colobus, I saw one individual. It's a good sign because they were not seen in 2007, so we do know that that species still exists over there, but I did only see one individual, so that's not really indicative of any sort of population size. It's just, it exists, so that's a good thing. The monkey I was looking for, the red colobus, didn't find any. And then this one is pretty cool. We did see this one. Its population numbers are also going down, just like these, but it's not significant. So the population is relatively the same, although slightly decreasing. What is cool though is as these monkeys have declined, so if you take all the population of monkeys is 100%, the proportion of that 100% of these that is made up of this species is increasing. So what looks like is happening, although we can't actually prove it, what looks like is happening is as these populations have decreased, this one might be more resilient to hunting, and it might be released from competition. So it might be increasing relative to these others because it doesn't have to compete with them anymore. There's lower numbers, so it can get better access to resources. So that was kind of cool. So decent results from our fact-finding mission. And what all these decreases are driven by are, again, hunting, right? So the red are data from my survey, and this was from 2012. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was a week-long survey, and I counted something like 650 shotgun shells, which is a lot of shotgun shells. I mean, it is just literally shotgun shell, shotgun shell, shotgun shell, right? So a lot of hunting. 25 shotgun shells per kilometer in this region, which was to the north of the valley, and almost 20 to the south of the valley. Right, and so that's that red colobus, the one I was looking for. What that means is we estimated that the population in this southern protected area sort of centralized down here, but reached all the way across. Probably not up here, but maybe a couple individuals up in this area, right? But since we didn't find it, we now think that it's probably only in this little area right down here. So we went from an area of about 500 square kilometers that we thought was its range, or potential range, to an area of about 180 square kilometers. So big reduction in the range, and probably not good for that species. So how do we go forward? Right, the only threat to these populations that I've been talking about is this hunting on the island. And what I advocate for, what the group I work with advocates for, is legitimate enforcing the existing legislation. Right, there's already a ban that says you can't hunt primates, so all you need to do is enforce that. And one of the things that we're trying to do is just get anything done, and it's not happening. But we're working on it. The government has not gotten on board with it yet. Again, one of the benefits of a dictatorship, right? I told you there was 2 transport routes to the market, right? There's only 2 roads into the town. There's already a bunch of checkpoints that anybody has to go through, and there's a bunch of guys with guns at every one of these checkpoints. All they need to do is be slightly less drunk, which would be good, and then walk up to the car and say, do you have any bushmeat in your car? I'm going to check your trunk. And that would drastically reduce the amount of monkeys that are coming to the market, but they're not doing it. And then prohibit shotgun hunting. What we want to do, again, is get the shotguns out of the forest, because if you go fishing for bluefish and you catch a sea robin, but you happen to like eating sea robin, you're probably going to eat that sea robin, right? It's the same idea. If you go out hunting something like a rat or hunting something like a diker, which probably is pretty resilient to hunting, and you see a monkey that just happens to walk by you as you're pointing your gun, you're probably going to shoot that monkey, right? So what we're trying to do is get the shotguns out of the forest as well. However, that is much more difficult than just getting somebody to enforce the legislation. And we do this through a lot of government advocacy. We work with the national university in the country, and we wrote a big report for the government a couple years ago in Spanish. It's the only Spanish-speaking country in Africa, which is pretty cool. So we wrote it, submitted to the government. We do a lot of teaching, like getting local people out. So we work with the university. I teach a field course over there for American students and Ecuador-Guinean students. We go out and we learn about how to do field research in the forest. It's a whole lot of fun. I work with a monitoring team. So we've got a group of 6 guys that goes out 2 weeks every month and walks around with my data collection computer, and they go out and they count monkeys for us, and we keep constant track of the population. We just did a documentary that we finished up and premiered in March. So that's exciting. Do a lot of research. That's me and my research team in 2011. And then we also do a lot of stuff in the bushmeat. So that's this guy right here. That's Reginaldo. He's responsible for counting all the bushmeat numbers for us. And then down below, we also have collaborated with a bunch of people that do a lot of cell and molecular work. So this particular thing is actually the study I mentioned, the SIV study. So if you guys are familiar with SIV, it's HIV in monkeys, actually in simians. So it's in apes, so gorillas, chimps, and bonobos. We had a guy that took tissue samples and then analyzed it, and he just examined, looks like the simian immunodeficiency virus developed in West Africa. It's actually quite an old virus, and it wasn't thought to be very old, so it was pretty cool research. But either way, we collaborate with a lot of people, and we get a lot of people on the island out doing research, and so far we've had a lot of success, but we haven't hit that tipping point where the government really gets on board with enforcing their laws. That said, they don't enforce pretty much any law unless it's going to get somebody money, so it's not like we're unique. Sorry, I'm in your way. The take-home message here across this whole thing is I think that research is the coolest. I really like what I do. My job is, well, there's definitely drawbacks to doing it. Like I sit in front of the computer now that I'm not in the field, but in the field I get to live in the wild, wield a machete every day, bathe in these awesome rivers, wake up to the sunrise every day, and then I just walk through the forest and count monkeys and other animals. So it's a lot of fun. I also study birds, which I don't ever talk about, but these are some photos from the bird research that I do. We catch birds and we measure them. We look at the diversity across the elevation gradient on the island. And what I would say is research, being involved in research has afforded me a lot of cool opportunities. So getting to go to Bioko in the first place. This is a short-term project I did in Barnegat Bay. You guys should be familiar with that. It's down in Waretown at a research center there. And I was looking at differential predation on blue crabs. So I was, you can see it, I was tying up blue crabs in different types of underwater vegetation and seeing how often they got eaten. So it was unfortunate for the blue crabs, but it was cool for me. Although, I don't know if you can see it there. So I was in the bay in September, and we had a nor'easter come through, and it just destroyed my research site, and it was also freezing cold. So my conclusion for this research project was that it failed miserably. And then I was like, no one should ever do this again. So that was fun. And then I've also worked with a group in the Pinelands, the Pinelands Preservation Alliance. If you guys, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with the Pine Barrens and the Pinelands. It's one of the rarest habitats on Earth, and it's one of the I think the second largest in the world, but it's one of the largest dwarf pine forests in the world, and it's just right outside your doorstep. So I would recommend, if you've never been to the Pine Barrens, just go down there and check it out. It's super awesome, and it's beautiful, and there's just these hidden gems in Jersey, and I can't tell people enough. I'm like, how can you rag on Jersey when we've got the Pine Barrens? It's just awesome. And this guy I worked with on a project, so he's doing like a rare plants of New Jersey. So we went through herbarium specimens and stuff, and we mapped the distributions across New Jersey. And then my research has gotten me not only to go to Africa, but I've got to go to a lot of cool places too. So it's opened the door for me to go to China. I went to China for 2 weeks and got to visit a panda breeding center there, which was pretty awesome. They were actually building a new site to sort of reintroduce pandas back to the wild. I got to go to Japan. This is a standard Asian tourist pose. I don't know if you guys are familiar. You guys ever see Asian tourists? They all come out of the bus, and they've all got these big cameras, and they're all like, "Yay!" And so we decided we would do that in Japan because we're stupid. So yeah, that's me and my colleague Jake in Japan, and I don't know if you guys can read this, but this is really awesome. So we went to a sanctuary where they have these Japanese macaques. It's the only monkey in temperate monkey. These guys live in snow. You guys have probably seen these guys will sit in like
hanging out in the hot springs.
Yeah, the hot springs in Japan. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so we went to this thing, and one of the signs says, "The monkey park is not only a monkey. The bird and the deer also look for it." And I was like, okay, I guess there's birds and deer.
English funny that it was, that's
Yeah.
perfect for that one. That's a great
Yeah.
website.
It's really, Japan was a trip, man. It was such a weird place.
Yeah.
Really cool though. Although I will say we went to one restaurant and they had like a menu that was just pictures, and it was like choose the type of whale that you want to eat. It's like,
Oh.
yeah, I think this is frowned upon. This is like a total nerd slide. So I went to Hawaii. This is Hawaii. I don't have any like tropical pictures of Hawaii put up, but I did get to go see this really awesome observatory. This is the highest point in Hawaii. It's one of the best places in the world to see the stars. So there's all these observatories. This is the actual top of the mountain. This is Mount Kea. It's like 13,000 feet, I think. And then, if you guys are familiar, the Mauna Loa facility, it's run by NOAA and NASA, so National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and then NASA. This is sort of like the gold standard of climate research. They're like leading the charge in climate research in the United States, and they've been keeping track of this atmospheric carbon dioxide since the late 50s. It's super cool, and climate change is really bad, especially for us. We live at the beach. It's gonna affect us pretty badly. But if you guys follow this at all, this is the Keeling curve. This is, again, you saw I work with large data that goes up and down, so I kind of dig this. But total nerd photo. I took a photo of a computer that collects this data. I just thought it was awesome. So anyway, I also got to go to Cancun last summer. So last summer I went to Hawaii and Cancun in a span of 3 weeks, and my wife was like, "I hate you." Yeah, so that was pretty fun. So in Cancun, we got to do a lot of science, but then we also did a lot of this, which was also pretty cool. So all that stuff aside, one of the great things about doing all this research is I got to work with all these cool people and do a lot of neat stuff. I've got to work with different funding organizations. I begged people for money, and then some people gave it to me and some people didn't. I get to work with the National University. I work for this group, the Open Biodiversity Protection Program, and like I said, I worked with all these people, and it's one of those things where they say it takes a village, right? I couldn't have done all this research without all these great people, and it's been a blast. So if you're into research, it can take you cool places, and it can help you meet cool people. I'll end there. I can answer any questions you guys have. I'll just tell you, so you can't see it, but I lived right here for a while. It was pretty awesome. There's a little river, and I lived just right in there. I had my hammock up right over the river. It was nice.
How long were you there for?
About a month.
Oh, wow.
It was awesome.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. Any
So-
questions, guys?
Yeah.
How long does it take you to fly to that island?
So I have to fly to Europe first. So depending on where I fly, it's usually about 8-ish hours to the place in Europe, and then depending on how I go down from there, it's anywhere from 6 to 9 hours.
Is there not stops to the island from Europe?
No. Yeah, from Europe, yeah. So this is a former Spanish colony. So if you fly to, you can fly U.S. to Madrid, Spain, and then you can go direct, and you can go U.S. to Paris, because at one point the French dominated this part of Africa. So there's still a lot of French economic interest. So you go U.S. to Paris, Paris to Malabo, and then there's a German flight from U.S. to Frankfurt, and that is the one that we take most often now because it's on Lufthansa. If anybody's ever flown Lufthansa, it's
Awesome. Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah.
The other ones, they basically punch you in the face at the door.
Yeah.
Lufthansa's like, here, have some brandy.
Yeah.
So Lufthansa is, Lufthansa, we stop in Nigeria, and we don't get off the plane, but it's mostly direct.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we come back. We'll do some more monkey stuff. So, Drew, who owns the oil company? Exploiting.
Well, I can't say that they're all bad, because ExxonMobil for all its terrible stuff, has funded us.
Really? Yeah.
They're our
Okay.
biggest funders. And
Well, that's blood money. I mean,
Yeah.
just like when they did that deal with New Orleans and stuff. Now, you know, Shell is like dishing out money to everybody because now they feel bad, right? You know? What? I know.
It's like the only time.
Um,
Cool though. Is that a picture of you in Japan? Was that in Kyoto?
our
Yeah.
papers
Yeah, I was just there.
taxonomy.
nice, do you like it?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like
Okay.
Yeah, it's such a-
we chipped
It's such
chipped
a
away the
weird
first
like,
6 or 7
that was my
slides
first
of
time in Asia.
taxonomy.
Well, I went to China, but when I was in China, I was on like I was with like 15 other people. And in Japan, I was with that guy in the photo and my advisor. And my advisor's she's old, so she didn't really do anything. So we were walking around like, what the hell is going on? But I can't read a single sign. You know, it was so cool.
it's cool. Yeah. Did you find it in Tokyo or Osaka?
Osaka.
Oh yeah, because in Tokyo all the signs are like in Japanese and English, but in Kyoto they're like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's so, I mean, as I've gotten older, I've become sort of OCD about certain things. Like, and I was totally, like, digging the way that like, everything is so organized. You know, like, the houses.
But it's like the bullet point, it's like 30 seconds late, it's like the longest.
Joe Grenier, reporting from 508 now. Joe
What
Grenier,
were you just visiting?
508 now.
Mostly it's in Tokyo, but it's like a day.
Nice.
It's cool. By the way, yeah.
Yeah, it's the river there in the center, you know, all the restaurants along the river.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I just couldn't get over how beautiful the city was. It was so clean.
What time of year did you go?
September.
That's nice, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I also didn't know that Japan was going to be like 90 degrees before I went too. I was just sweating
It
miserably.
was like, I was 8 April, but it was so really hot really early.
Did you go? Were you there for like the thing where they light the mountains on fire?
No, but I was there for the cherry blossoms though. Which was
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, cool. So, you know, all the Japanese people like running around freaking out.
Yeah.
You know, they like the cherry blossoms.
Yeah, I was. I got stopped in China. I got stopped a bunch because it was right after the Olympics. And I got stopped because they said I looked like the swimmer guy.
Michael Phelps.
Yeah.
Get
Because
out.
I'm
That's
a tall
awesome.
white guy, and they're like, oh my god, Michael Phelps.
You should let him take pictures with you.
I did. I took a couple photos, yeah. And I was like,
That's awesome. Michael Phelps.
and then one of the researchers at the panda base, like, so you guys ever watch the show Heroes? Or like in the new Star Trek movie, you know Zachary Quinto?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. She was like, he's in that show Heroes, right? As Siler. She was
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you're Siler. And
Oh,
the whole
that's so
time she'd
funny.
like, we'd be at dinner, she'd creep up behind me and be like,
That's
oh. Yes.
That's funny. That's funny. I wonder if they think, you know, like a lot of people, I mean, this is kind of the racist thing is like, oh, well, all Asian people look the same. I wonder if they think that about, like,
They do.
yeah.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
They should look, they have the same hair color, eye color.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, they say that it runs across, yeah, it runs across all the races. They all think everybody looks the same.
Yeah.
So you probably got mistaken for a lot of American.
No, I think that's really true because most of the Africans I work with say the same thing.
Yeah.
Like all you white people look alike.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, right? That's so funny. So, quick summary, guys. Now, this island is its own country, right? It's not owned by another. Is it owned by
there
another?
isn't, it's its own country,
Mhm.
but it also has a mainland portion.
Okay.
So there's
I did not even know it was its own country. That's crazy. I thought it
Yeah.
was owned by like another, like, you know. Country.
no, yeah. So the capital is on this country, on the island, and then there's a mainland portion, but it's like 400 kilometers away.
Mhm.
So if you know sort of the armpit of Africa, right? There's Nigeria, and then Cameroon, and then Cameroon is huge, you know, and so that comes around the turn, and then along the coast, the next country is Equatorial Guinea.
Okay.
But it's sort of sandwiched in, like it's a square,
Okay.
and then here's Cameroon, and then all of this is Gabon.
Okay.
And then they also have, I was actually going to include a map, but I didn't. They have a little island. It's one of the challenging things about the country. I have one of the guys in my lab is doing more like policy stuff, is trying to manage three disparate situations. So the other island, Annobon, is in the middle of the ocean, and it's like 17 square kilometers. It's like a dot, you know. And then Bioko is like, you know, basically 3 volcanoes that has a totally unique set of taxa that live on the island. And then Rio Muni is the mainland portion, which is like sandwiched in along the coast. So you've got more or less the same like megafauna. You've got like gorillas, chimps, elephants, leopards, stuff like that, that all the other countries have. So if you pass a hunting law, like basically you have to run the country, like any sort of environmental stuff has to be split up, you know, because it's two totally different situations. You know, what are you going to say? Like, don't hunt elephants on Bioko. It's like, well, it's stupid. There's no elephants, you know. You know, so you have to like the management is sort of drastically different.
Now, do these form as volcanic islands? Is it like much the same? We're just talking about the Galapagos and how all the flora and fauna probably drifted from the mainland, and some of them.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, no,
some of them thrive on the islands, but they were wiped out on the mainland, kind of thing. And
yeah. So
I'm wondering what
the island itself is on the continental shelf.
Okay.
And so at one point in at the end of the last ice age, sea levels come up, and that's separated from the mainland. So it's only been separated. It's probably been separated and then connected multiple times since its formation, but most recently it was connected about 10,000–12,000 years ago.
Okay, so recently.
Yeah, so that's why, like, with the primates, there hasn't been a lot of divergence because they're, primates don't reproduce as very quickly, so they haven't had a lot of time to speciate. Whereas certain things like small mammals, like little shrews and stuff, there's a couple endemics. There's a bunch of endemism in frogs. So endemic, you guys know what endemic means? So an endemic species is something that's only found in one place. So the 7 monkeys on my island, all of them are endemic to the island. But the 6 monkeys, besides that big red one, are endemic at the subspecies level. So resolving a species in science is really difficult, and people will fight to the death over different species concepts. So the idea of taxonomy in species is sort of a theory, right? And people adhere to different theories. So there's, let's say, the drill, right? The big monkey. That's Mandrillus leucophaeus poensis. And then on the mainland, there's Mandrillus leucophaeus leucophaeus. Saying that actually sounds like Planet of the Apes. You use the subspecies to say, well, they're not actually different species. They're very closely related, but they're diverged enough that they're a little different. So the one on the island is a little bit smaller.
So it's a unique subspecies then?
Yeah, so 6 of them are endemic subspecies. Based on most recent taxonomy, 6 of them are endemic subspecies, and then in the red colobus, although the IUCN, the people that decide whether things are endangered, near threatened, vulnerable, stuff like that, they don't consider it a species yet. But the most recent taxonomic analysis for them, done by like the expert in taxonomy, considers them a species. So they're the only endemic primate species. But my lab mate who studies frogs has a conservative estimate right now, he thinks he's got at least 4 new species, and just because he's the first person to look at frogs on the island. That's the coolest part about this island, is because right after independence, there was a horrible dictator. So this dictator is actually not that bad because he doesn't really kill a lot of people. And the people he does kill, you don't even really hear about it. So I don't know. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But he is a dictator, and he doesn't focus on human welfare. He's notorious for human rights abuses. All that aside, the country doesn't have civil war, and he more or less is not killing his people. I really think he doesn't kill his people. But the first dictator, first president after independence from Spain, killed about a third of the population, and used to kill people because they wore glasses. So you would not be good. You're like an intellectual. An intellectual's bad. He wanted like a return to the roots. So he ripped out all the infrastructure that the Spanish colonial power put in, like power lines, water lines, stuff like that. He's like, no, we're going back to tribalism. And eventually, so the current president was his nephew, and he shot him. they had a coup and they shot him. And he's been in power since 1979. So, wait, what was the original point? Totally.
You were talking about the IUCN classifying, oh no, wait, I'm trying to remember how we got to the dictator point. Endemic species.
Yeah, I don't know. This is the problem. If you go into academia, you lose your mind. So don't.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I'm like, how can we backtrack to where we got today?
Yeah. But
so-
yeah, so he's a. Oh, what was? Yeah. So it's.
Okay.
I remember the point. That nobody had been there, right? Nobody was doing research. Spaniards did research, but they. So you remember that map when I said deforestation is not a big deal, right? There was like a whole area of
And
dark
this is
green.
mostly because of the terrain being so
Yeah.
rugged that
Yeah.
it's hard to get logs out of there, so cutting down the forest is not a huge issue in this particular area.
Yeah.
Because usually that's like the number one cause of extinctions is habitat destruction. Like worldwide, that's a big, big problem. But where Drew is studying, it's not so much the habitat destruction, it's the hunting, right? So that's what he's focused on.
Yeah.
So,
And
sorry, no logging.
and the Spaniards, what they did log, like stuff that was readily available, they actually, so this place used to have the best cocoa in the world at one point.
Get out.
And so the guy also just abolished the cocoa industry too.
Nice, nice.
And nowadays, actually, cocoa is sort of like slave labor, so it's not coming back, it's too labor intensive. But cocoa is a shade crop, so they kept a lot of forest, and the cocoa grows underneath. So it's like, you know, a short tree that grows underneath in shade. So there's actually a lot of like sort of degraded forest, but a lot of intact habitat for primates. So there was no researchers because the dictator and then the current dictator, because he's afraid of losing power, is so xenophobic. He didn't let people in for the longest time. The only reason we're doing research there is because we're aligned with the National University. So we kind of got in through the back door, and there's so much intact habitat, like there's so much forest left. I mean, the cool thing about this place, like I know I just talked about dead monkeys and I talked about a dictator and all this stuff, but it actually could be a success story for conservation in West Africa if someone in the government decides they want to do it. If someone takes the step, it could, like, all they need to do is start enforcing their laws, which I know is a big task, but if they did anything, they could set the standard for conservation in Africa, at least in this area of Africa, because they still have forests and they still have a lot of primates.
Now, invasives aren't a problem here either, like there's no.
I mean, maybe, I don't know. I'm
Any,
not.
like wild pigs, goats, not anything? No.
Any wild pigs have been shot a long time.
No, they would eat them or.
They eat them.
Right. So you guys are catching up to what Drew's putting down, which is like, it's actually cheaper, it would be cheaper to feed a family with just buying a chicken for, what was it, $5-6 or whatever, than to spend $15 on a rat. You know, but people are still buying the rats, you know, because it's like a cultural thing, right? They like to eat them, and they feel like it's their right to eat them, you know? So there's no need for them to be eating this bushmeat. It's something that could easily be resolved. You know, it's not like their entire subsistence relies on eating monkeys and rats, but they choose to do so. So the hard part of what Drew is doing is he sees, I mean, we can easily, you know, because we're from our culture, we can see what's so wrong about this, you know, but trying to instill those values into another culture, into another country, and try to get the policies changed is the hard part, right?
Well, and I mean, you can. There's an example in the United States, right? People complain about the cost of gas while they drive a Suburban.
Right.
You know, and it's like, well, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I understand that you want. My mom drives a Suburban.
Sure.
But if you're gonna drive a Suburban, you can't say the cost of gas is too high. It's like you drive the least efficient car possible.
Yeah.
Like, don't drive that car.
That's a really,
Change your
that's a
lifestyle.
good example, yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, relative to the rest of the world, gas in our country is incredibly cheap. It costs like $7 a gallon in Bioko. In Europe, it's like I think 6, 7. Yeah, it's super expensive. And so, it's the same idea. People in the United States like driving big trucks, but it's even though every scientist says climate change is bad. Well, A lot of people don't believe in climate change. B,
Well,
people are like, well, I'm not
when you
gonna
showed
change
that
my
graph,
life.
I just wanted just to make our point, your and my point is because I had this discussion with another science teacher who will not be named. the other day, and it's not, nobody, I don't think, is disputing that carbon dioxide levels are at an all-time high, right, in the atmosphere. You guys all see, so that graph, right? I mean, this is data. You
can't negate it. It's
you
just,
can't
it's just
change the
empiric
facts just
data.
because you choose not to believe them, right? Now, I think the argument, though, is that what I have with this other teacher was that how much of that CO2 has an anthropogenic source, and I think it's just people not wanting to take responsibility for the CO2 levels. You know, there's like, oh, it's just a natural cyclical thing, and I'm like, well, natural cyclical shifts in carbon dioxide have been occurring, but not to this level.
That's a perfect, I mean,
right.
Let me go back for a second.
Yeah.
So if you guys, right, climate change, this is why I like this thing so much.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Remember I talked about the long-term trend, and I told you how like we normalized stuff and squashed it together and we looked at the slope of the line, right? This is what they've done here. So this black line is the long-term trend, right? All this other stuff is the seasonal variation. So you take the seasonal variation out, right? You still have a big old upslope, right? And that's I think what I like so much about this is because it's a perfect example of someone doing what I do, you know?
Right, right. Now, guys, seasonal variation, okay? You guys understand that, you know what, anybody know what a deciduous tree is? Broadleaf trees, what do they do when it gets cold? What happens to the leaves? Right, so what happens to carbon dioxide intake when you lose your leaves? Do plants take in more carbon dioxide when they lose their leaves or less? Less. So in the winter, what happens to CO2 levels? They go up, don't they? In the summer, they go down, right? Because the leaves are sucking in that CO2, photosynthesis. That's why the red line, see, the spikes up, spikes down, spikes up, spikes down. But when you draw a best fit line through it, the black line, see what happens? I mean, you can't ignore that trend. It's happening. We know it's happening, right? Now, the question is, what's responsible for that, right? You guys are all breathing out carbon dioxide, yes? We're exhaling carbon dioxide. So there is natural CO2 being added to the atmosphere, but what's exacerbating the problem?
Burning fossil fuels.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and if you go back, I mean, there's a natural thing, and then as soon as the Industrial Revolution is, instead of going like natural and sort of increase, it goes whoop,
yeah.
you know?
And add to that, over 7 billion people on this planet now. We have more people living on the Earth than ever before in the Earth's history.
Every day.
Every day, more people being born, right? And everybody wants an air conditioner, everybody wants a car to drive, everybody wants to heat their homes, right?
Well, it's really hot.
Yes, it is. Well, you wonder why it's really hot, Drew.
Yeah.
I know, right? Isn't that funny? Like, it's like this, this like Mobius loop thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, the more people there are, the more demand there is for fossil fuels, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's funny is
Yeah.
at the root of everything, it's like, well, there's just too many people.
It really is, you know? Yeah,
So
yeah. So, I mean,
that's kind of a hard.
I think it's so cool that
solve.
you got to actually go to this facility that, you know, this graph that Drew's showing you right here is like the gold standard, like benchmark graph of legit carbon dioxide data right here.
Yeah,
You see this in
all
every
this stuff
textbook,
is based
this
on
graph.
this. Yeah.
And that's the computer they're gathering it with. That's pretty crazy that you took this. You are a nerd. I love it.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, but I mean, I work with this guy who's really into bioinformatics. Like he just got into med school and he's.
That's fortuitous.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I mean, like, it's nice to work with a guy because I don't get half of this stuff.
No, it's delightful
Can you explain
because
it to me, please?
he helped. I mean, he did the lion's share of like the data crunching, which was awesome. But
Wow.
yeah, so he's doing PhD, MD, all bioinformatics. Like he's not doing clinical stuff. But I took this back and was like, Steve, you gotta see this time series data. You're not gonna believe it. It's so beautiful. And I
Yeah.
showed it to him. He's like, nice. You know? He was like, yeah, I can dig that. All right, cool. There's actually a plaque like this is
Yeah.
up on a plaque outside the building. It's pretty
Wow.
nice.
That's awesome.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. If you guys ever get the chance to go, I don't think you can go to Mauna Loa if you're public. I don't think it's public. I think we-
Yeah. If you're non-credentialed, yeah.
Yeah. But it's super cool. Like it's on this like 1-lane road
Yeah.
over old fog
Don't they
bank.
have like a really cool telescope? I'm looking at that building on the far right there, that dome.
Yeah, so
thing.
this is at the top of Mauna
That's
Kea,
like- okay.
right? So this is over here.
Yeah.
And then the Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, so it's two different peaks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know it's like one of the best land-based telescopes like in the world. There,
Yeah.
You know, most powerful.
It's super cool.
Yeah.
It's really high too, and it's such a. I mean, so I went to this conference.
You ever have altitude sickness?
I didn't know, but we were in a car.
Mm-hmm.
But I went. So this conference was all based. It was all people that study tropical alpine ecosystems. So my island goes over 10,000 feet. So we have tropical alpine ecosystems, which are really rare throughout the world. But so it was a bunch of like nerds.
Yeah.
You know. But what I thought was so cool is I'd never been to Hawaii, and I went to Hawaii, and we spent most of our time in the mountains, although I did get to go to the beach a couple times. But it's like a total mind blow. The island is incredible. I mean, like, does that look like Hawaii? Does that look like anybody's picture of Hawaii? Like the only day I got to see, like, we were in the shadow of the mountains, so you know, there's no rain, so it's dry as heck. You know, so the whole time I was just like, wow, this is a weird place. It's really cool.
That's great.
On the way to the airport, someone drove me in front of the mountains and showed me like the vegetation.
Yeah.
So that was like I was like, oh, cool. So that does exist. All right.
Wow. So in our other class, someone asked Drew if he had ever tried to eat bushmeat, you know, which is, you know, so you wanna share with us your observations on bushmeat?
I haven't eaten monkey, and so in my half-hearted attempt to explain the SIV, right? So
Yeah.
eating monkey, well, if it's cooked correctly, eating monkey you'll be fine. It's just like eating anything. But if it's not cooked correctly, right? Like if you go to a steak restaurant and you get something really rare, right? You get some blood in there or really rare and it's not cooked, you have potential to get really sick, right? You see those things, the warnings at all the restaurants. So the bushmeat trade, specifically in Cameroon, they believe it was in southeast Cameroon and it was hunting chimps. That's how HIV became HIV. So there's a simian immunodeficiency virus, which is in monkeys and apes and stuff in that area. And particularly chimps, you know, they're our closest relative. They believe someone was chopping up chimps, then it went from SIV, got into us. You know, viruses are incredibly adaptive, became HIV, and now HIV is, you know, it's a pretty bad thing. So anyway, I don't eat monkey for health reasons and for it's just weird to me. Like I'll eat pretty much anything once, but I just can't. I can't do that. Plus, I like monkeys a lot. I don't know, it's just weird. I mean, I like cows too, but cows are delicious.
Yeah, they are.
I don't know.
So the point that Drew is making, and I think that's a good point, is when you are talking about something, an organism like a monkey that's taxonomically just so similar to us, that a lot of the viruses that affect monkeys can also affect humans, and you don't want to catch that from eating monkey meat, right?
Well, and it goes back.
And that's how
the other way,
HIV, which is now such a scourge, you know, AIDS and all that, made to jump to humans is from consumption of bushmeat like that. So you need to be really, really cognizant of that. What might be the next virus that makes the jump, you know? So.
Does it kill the monkeys?
No.
No.
No. So the researcher that did the work that we collaborated with, he actually believes, because it's thought to be a relatively new thing, right, a new virus, but he believes it's sort of it's considerably older, and he believes that the primates in this area of the world have co-evolved with it. So they don't. It's something that they get, but it doesn't kill them.
But it kills us.
Yeah.
Because compared to how long it's been circulating in the human population, it's a very short period of time. What would they put it at? The 1980s, 1960s?
I think it was the 70s.
70s,
Started
okay.
in the 70s and 80s.
So-
The early 80s, I don't remember.
So when you consider how short a period, how many human generations have gone through, not, you know, evolution doesn't take place like that. So, but these monkeys have lived with this virus for a lot longer. I think you said, your research guy said, for a lot longer than we even suspected before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
But just the other thing too, like going back to the transfer of viruses, like it goes to them as well. So they're not, like if you study, there's places like research centers that are set
Yeah.
up where primates are habituated, you know? And a lot of times one of the major concerns is making sure the primates don't get sick from you.
Yeah, I worked in a monkey lab before I taught, and we used to have to get like, I had to get TB tests like every couple of months and stuff, because they didn't want me giving something potentially to the monkeys in the research facility. They monitor us more closely than the monkeys in some cases, you know?
Because if they get a novel disease, it'll just rip through them,
Yeah,
much like HIV does.
yeah. So you have tried some bushmeat though?
I have, yeah. I've eaten the little blue diker, the small forest diker. Tastes like deer, but smaller. It tastes like a lamb-sized deer. And the rat, and monitor lizard, and squirrel, and that might be it. Oh, the red diker too. I've eaten both the dikers. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I live in the forest for a long period of time, and most of my food comes out of a can. So occasionally, it's nice to have something that is chewable. It doesn't like dissolve in your mouth. I tell you what, the coolest thing is when I work, like whenever I'm on the beach. So occasionally I'll be working deeper in the forest, but like on the southern part of the island, I do have a camp that's on the beach, and the locals are so good. They're from a village right near the beach. They're so good at catching fish by hand. So they just basically they'll kill a crab because there's crabs everywhere. They'll take the meat, shove it on a hook, and then just swing it like this and whip it out into the ocean. And they'll just sit there, and then just as soon as something bites, they just rip it out. And I am not good at it, but they are great. And they just pull out red snapper like this big. I'm like, yes, please, thank you. You know, red snapper and jack, and I mean, just delicious fish. Oh God, that's nice.
That's awesome.
That's my sort of favorite bush meat over there.
We've got Haley.
Like, is it ever like dangerous, like being around there, like with all like those natives going around with, like their
Good
guns?
question. Have you ever been threatened or?
I've never been, so I can answer that two ways.
I'm like, wonder what happens when you come up to somebody with a shotgun?
So the hunters,
You know?
the hunters are not aggressive because I don't have the legal authority to do anything to them. So they know I can't do anything to them. They know that, like, there's not a lot of white guys in the forest, so they know why I'm there. Like, we're pretty visible in country. I mean, as an organization, not like the white people are visible. But so we do have like a presence. So hunters know. Like, so if you're a hunter, I'm like, hey man, can I take a picture with you? They're like, no, you can't take a picture of me. I know I'm breaking the law. Like, no, absolutely not. But they've never threatened me in the forest. I've had guns pointed at me in Equatorial Guinea, but it's always been in the city. It's only happened a couple times, and it's been in the city, and it's been drunk people, drunk military. And it's not, the one time was in 2005, and another time was at a checkpoint in like 2007 or 2008, and I haven't had it happen since. They've actually gotten a little bit better about pointing guns at people.
Did you get tossed in jail once or something?
I did, yeah.
I thought you said, yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time I got a gun in my face. We were walking down the street, and at the time, I was dating a girl who was on the study abroad program with me in 2005, and we were walking. So every year in the fall, going to Christmas, they have this thing called the feria, and it's like a outdoor fair, right? And so we were going. It's an outdoor. I mean, it's a place for people to get together and drink, basically. So we were going to this place, and we're walking down the road, and we just happened to be walking in front of a military barracks, and she was saying something to me, like she was making fun of me, and I like put my arm around her and like gave her a noogie, you know, which is totally benign. I wasn't actually like punching her head. I was just like, hey, yeah, you got me, you know. And then these guys came out and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. It was actually the night of the Independence. It was Independence Day. That's why they're so drunk. But they came out and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. They gun in my face, like, you're beating up your wife. And I'm like, no, I'm not. So yeah, I got arrested for like an hour. And eventually one of my friends just gave me money and I wasn't arrested anymore.
Right.
But I haven't had any issues and I've never felt well, I felt a little unsafe, but I never felt like I was really in danger over there. Like, they're not gonna shoot me. Like I have more chance of getting shot in Philadelphia where I live. Like my house has been shot. My old house has been shot. Like a bullet hit my house in Philadelphia. Stray bullet. I've never ever felt that unsafe in this country. It's a long-winded answer.
I was gonna ask you that too, but Haley beat me to it, yeah.
I mean, I feel legitimately like if you guys know Philly, like Philly
Yeah.
is.
There's
it's
some
a
good
rough-
regions, there's some bad regions.
It's a rough town, yeah.
Yeah.
So now we live in Center City, and we don't have any problems. But there's parts of Philly that I'm definitely afraid of, and I don't have that problem in Victoria.
Huh.
Though there's a place called Campo Yaoundé, or New Building. They speak like pidgin English there too, and so it's like mini, which is slang for new building, and it was like a government-led sort of construction, like government housing, and that is a place I don't go. Like it's like martial law back there, so I don't go in there. But,
No sooner would I walk into Project National Park either.
well, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, what I tell
I'd just
students
be
all the
asking
time.
for trouble, I suspect, yeah.
The people hear only negative things about Equatorial Guinea in the news, but it's actually super safe. Like people don't have handguns. People have handguns all over the place here. Like
Yeah,
the only people that have guns in the military, yes, they're usually drunk,
yeah.
but most of the time their guns probably don't even have bullets. It's like, and they're not stupid. They will get in a lot of trouble if they shoot people.
Mhm.
So they don't do it. Whereas people shoot people all the time.
Now, is Spanish the main language spoken there, or is it tribe?
They speak Spanish.
Okay.
And they also speak French, because they're nestled in sort of
Right.
French area. And then they also speak pidgin English, which is sort of a combination, like a Creole of
Right.
French, Spanish, English, Portuguese. All mixed
Do you,
together.
how is your Spanish?
It's fine. I mean, I don't have any problems.
Yeah.
I speak it okay.
Yeah. Did you take French or Spanish here?
French.
Figured.
Yeah.
Yes, that one.
Yeah, what's funny though is now that I've learned Spanish, it was like Spanish is in my head, and it was just like, get out French. I can't speak a word of
Oh,
French.
that's wild.
Yeah, like I can understand French.
Yeah.
Like if I read it, I can kind of get what's going on, and I can pretty much,
Yeah.
like I can listen if it's slowly spoken, I can understand it. But now, like other than that, I can't speak it at all. I usually just say I don't speak French,
Right.
and then I try to I can get by with pidgin English too. So
Yeah.
just make yourself sound stupid.
Right. I know, right? Dumb Americans.
I didn't go. It's like okay.
Yeah. Huh. Now, question, as far as like getting into the research in college, what you guys want to think about is these professors at your school when you're undergrad, they're always looking for like cheap slave labor, right? And so they're going to be advertising and putting things up. I mean, how do you find out about these opportunities, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, so I teach.
You
and I
can
always
latch
make
on
it
to,
annoying.
you gotta latch on to a professor who's doing research somewhere, and they're gonna cobble together a team of students, right? And they're gonna ship you off to this place and you're gonna do research, from what I understand, kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I have sort of two tiers of undergraduates that work for me. I have people that just do lab work, and most of my lab work is just entering data.
Right.
So I have this really sophisticated, sweet data collection sequence for my fieldwork, but the bushmeat stuff is just written down on a piece of paper, and everyone has to manually enter that in. So I have people that enter data for me, and usually what I would do is every time, it depends on what type of school you go to. If you go to a school like Drexel's a big school, you go to big schools, you'll have like TAs, and TAs are usually graduate students who are doing some sort of research, and then you can talk to your graduate students and try to latch on to their research, which gets you into the lab. So I always make an announcement like, hey, I need students for X, and I'll take on 3. I think this term I have 5. Yeah, I have 5 undergrads. But then you just talk to you talk to your professors and stuff like that. It's a really good way to even if like pre-med students, we have just a crap ton of pre-meds at Drexel. It's all they are, and I tell them too, it's a great way to differentiate yourself, because I have a bio pre-med degree. It's like, okay, so at Drexel, so do 600 other people,
Right.
each year. So how are you going to differentiate yourself in that? So that's actually what the study abroad
So
is
it's
too.
all about building a resume, guys, like, just like when you guys go to apply to colleges want to see like well-rounded individuals who have involved in sports, clubs, student council, you know what I mean, like, because they have 1 million people with a 3.8 GPA applying to their college. So you have to stand out, right? So you have to be, I don't know if you've been thinking about this, but you need to kind of like build a resume to make you the candidate that they want, right? And so what you want to do is, no matter what your major is think about doing some of these study abroad programs, because that makes you more worldly than the person that didn't do that study abroad thing, right?
Well, you know what the key though I would say is, I tell everybody to study abroad just for your own.
Oh, because they grow up in this little microcosm called Point Pleasant Beach and they never get out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're
What
me,
do you mean? That never
if you're
happens
me and your mom is like the matriarch of the high school, like, you know, I was like, I need to get out.
Sheltered much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
And I took that to the extreme. I've been a lot of places.
Yeah.
You know, and I go to like in Africa where I'm like, well, I'll see you in 3 months. Goodbye. You know?
Yeah.
But I advocate to students all the time, like you should really study abroad, get involved in research, and if you do study abroad, it's sort of a dime a dozen. If you like New Zealand thing, like nobody would care that I went to New Zealand. I went there, I traveled around, you know, went to, you know, drank a lot.
So you're taking classes
I took classes at this-
ostensibly to be in New Zealand, but you weren't like doing research in New Zealand?
No,
Okay.
yeah, so that's the thing, it doesn't, like, everybody does that. People went there, I mean.
Now, did your sister do study abroad in England or something?
Yeah, she went to London.
Okay, I thought so, okay, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
she did London, but then, but a study abroad, so London, like, she, how do I phrase it? If you go to a place like London, or like Rome, or Paris, unless you're doing something like, if you just go there to have a good time, that's great for you, you know, but I always tell students, like, one of the great, like, we have a study abroad program, obviously, on where I work, and I was like, one of the great things about this program is, not only do you get to go abroad, and go to this really cool place in Africa, but so the course that I teach has people design, you have to come up with, design, and then implement a field research project. So you start to finish, and a lot of undergrads don't get that opportunity. And like if you do a good job, you also get a letter of recommendation from me, which is hard to get from an undergraduate. Not from me, I mean just generally, letter of recommendations are hard to get. You have to sort of distinguish yourself out of the masses. And then B, you show that you have the sort of the critical thinking necessary to apply yourself to a research project, which is great going for any job. You say, okay, I, on my own, developed a project, I figured out how to do it, I went to the field and I did it, I analyzed those data, and then I stood up in front of a bunch of people and defended my work, which is like great for undergrads. You don't get a lot of opportunities to do that. You don't get a lot of opportunities anywhere to do that. You can do that here, like science fairs and stuff, but then you don't do science fairs again until like college.
No, that's an excellent point, because these are things these guys need to start thinking about, considering, you know, the direction they're going to be taking. And
What are you guys, sophomores, freshmen?
sophomores and juniors usually,
Yeah, I mean now, so you guys are looking at colleges and stuff like that? Yeah, good luck with that. It's just a choice to decide your life, no big deal.
I know. Now, where'd you get your undergrad?
Arcadia.
Arcadia, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And
But
you
I mean, I was also, I should say that I'm sort of a weird case where I was like, I need to get out of Jersey. And then I ended up going to school just over the border. Like, Arcadia was actually my last choice, but they gave me the biggest scholarship. And at the time, my dad was sick too, so I was like, well, it makes sense. Looking back, I probably would have gone to school in Jersey. I probably should have gone to like a state school because student loans suck.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. Had I not gone, you know, I never would have met my wife. I never would have gotten all these.
Oh, I didn't know you met her there. Okay.
Yeah, I met her in college. So it's one of those things where, like, looking back, it's like I basically paid, you know, I have $25,000 worth of debt to start my career and meet my wife. So, you know, was it worth it? I don't know. You know, depends on the day.
Right. And then how'd you land at Drexel then?
So the study abroad program in Bioko was really formative for me. You know, I really liked it. And so when I graduated, I was dating a girl, and I moved to DC, and I was applying for jobs to work in the primate field, like conservation, like not graduate school. And I got a couple of those jobs, but then the relationship was a bit toxic, and so I got 2 job offers, one in Nigeria and one in South America, and I had to turn them down because I developed a bit of a debt from moving down, like basically getting an apartment and moving down there. And so I went home and I was just I was bartending over at the shipwreck. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, you know, they've got a job opening running that program, running the study abroad program in Yoko, and I was like, well, great, you know, because that would give me, like, the conservation jobs, they were like volunteer, you know, so it was like a research apprenticeship, you know. So this was going to pay me a full salary, benefits, and all that jazz, so that the debt could be nullified, and I could still do what I like, you know, sort of auxiliary. So I applied for the job and got it, and then while I was there, I was doing a good job, and my advisor, current advisor, was like, hey, you're good at your job. Do you want to be a graduate student? And I was like, yeah. And at that time, I was with my now wife, and she was living in Philly, and so it was just like, great.
That makes sense, yeah.
Because I could be based in Philly, but then still do my field research,
Right.
which was sort of juxtaposing.
Hey, no one was more shocked than I when your mother told me that he was going to be working on his PhD at Drexel. I said, really? I don't know. I never saw you like falling so in love with the science.
Yeah,
cool.
I know. It's just
Cool.
it's sort of like one of those, like, you know, domino effects. I just sort of like, you know, had I not gone to New Zealand and like basically blown off school and hiked around and everything, I probably wouldn't have gotten so on board with the Department of Conservation work. You know,
Right.
I you know, I talked with a lot of those guys, and I'm just like, wow, this is awesome, because I can apply sort of environmental work to like my career, you know. So
I know I ask you this every time you come to visit, and I said, how do you keep your chin up when you see all this like destruction around you, like these poor monkeys, you know, dwindling in number, just since you've been on the job, and like still keep some hope that you can make a difference, that you can do something about it, because it's got to be kind of defeating some days, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a slippery slope though, because if you let the negativity in, I mean, the world. If you look at the world in a negative light, there's a lot of terrible things happening.
I'm just thinking conservation's got to be one of the hardest
Yeah,
fields
no,
to like
it's tough, and it's
be
a tough
positive
place.
about, I guess, because
It's a tough,
people
like
are
West
just
Africa
jerks,
is
you
a
know?
tough place in general, because there's such a callous attitude towards environmental
And
responsibility.
it's like the last place money goes, you know,
Yeah.
like when the budgets get tight, that's where they're gonna cut, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, it is difficult some days, and you know, like there's days where I really don't like it, but ultimately I like the people I work with over there, like and there's days that I want to just kill them too, but like most of the time they're good. There's a core group of people at the university and in the villages I work with, they see the value in wildlife, both like personal value, like sort of intrinsic, and then also like it's a benefit to the country. And so I'm heartened by those folks. And then on the other side, it's like all this terrible stuff going on in the world. If someone's not approaching it, then you know, then what are you doing? You know, like it's like the Hippocratic Oath. You know, it's like do no harm. You know, I feel like I can't. Having seen a situation, I couldn't stand by and not do something about it. You know? And I try to do that in my life as well. You know, sort of reduce my own footprint. You know, sort of shop responsibly. You know, if I have a choice between paying 50 cents for, you know, an apple that was organic and not with pesticides, or, you know, 25 cents for an apple that, you know, they raised the forest for, and I will pay the extra quarter.
You know,
You know?
take the train instead of driving, that kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, there's a certain, I think at a certain point you don't see it so much, I think, in the United States, because development is so entrenched here, especially here. Like I don't know. I mean, you'll see it now with Sandy. Like clean slate, you see what the environment does. Like it's pretty resilient. But when you don't give it a chance, I don't know. It's just in places like undeveloped countries where there's still like these swaths of wilderness. To watch it get cut away, it's like it's like watching your friend get beat up, you know, it's just like, it's so incredible what's happening there, you know, like, and to each their own, you know, some people, they're like, yeah, I don't wanna go outdoors, you know, but I look at it just like, it's fascinating, you know, like, you look at that site where I was living, it's like, I woke up every morning, I'm on this beautiful, untouched beach, you know, you give them the chance, they're gonna cut that forest down, you know, and then, you know, one thing I didn't even talk about, there's 4 species of sea turtles that nest there, and people come and they kill the sea turtles too. It's like just hulking behemoths, like a leatherback sea turtle, like the size of a small car.
Wow.
And they come up. This last field season, someone came up in the night and chopped up a sea turtle, a leatherback, just outside our camp.
Oh.
And you know, we caught it. We caught them. Like somebody took the spark plug out of their boat motor, and then woke me up and was like, "Hey, there's turtle poachers," and we you know, we're like, we're here, we're representatives of. We're technically not allowed to
Yeah.
do this, but we're like, we're taking your turtles. So we took the turtle and we buried it on the beach. You know, you've got this just archaic animal, and it's just been hacked to death. It's completely defenseless on the beach. You know, you guys know turtles. They come up on the beach to lay their eggs. Someone walked up to the turtle laying its egg and just like chopped its head off with a machete. You know, it's like, how do you? It's a cold-hearted thing to do, and I get it. People, you know, I get people need to eat. You know, like you know, we sort of dominate the world, and we need to provide for ourselves. But I think there's a difference between providing for yourself responsibly and then just killing something because you want to make cheap money. You know, that's what gets me about this country. It's like there's a whole area of like there used to be cattle farming in the country, and it was